the choice that changed everything. Sometimes, life doesn't change because of luck. It changes because of one decision. A decision so small that nobody notices it until years later, when everyone asks, how did he become so successful? This is the story of Daniel, a young man who had nothing extraordinary except the courage to make one difficult choice. Daniel lived in a small village surrounded by green hills. His family wasn't rich. His father repaired bicycles. His mother sold vegetables in the local market. They worked from sunrise to sunset, yet barely earned enough to survive. Daniel often watched luxury cars pass through the village. He would quietly whisper to himself, "One day, I'll build a life my parents never had." People laughed whenever they heard him. A mechanic's son dreaming of success? Wake up. People like us stay poor. Daniel never argued. He simply smiled. After finishing school, Daniel received 2 offers. The first came from a wealthy businessman. It promised quick money, easy work, fast success. Many young men in the village accepted similar jobs. They bought expensive phones, new motorcycles, fancy clothes. Everyone admired them. The second offer came from an old carpenter named Mr. Samuel. The pay was terrible. The work was difficult. The hours were long. But Samuel had one condition. "If you work with me, I'll teach you everything I know." Daniel looked at both opportunities. One offered comfort. The other offered growth. His friends laughed. Why waste years learning? Take the easy money. Even his relatives advised him. You need income now, not experience. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He walked outside and sat beneath an old banyan tree. His father quietly joined him. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Daniel asked, "Father, what would you choose?" His father smiled. "When I was your age, I always chose what was easy." He looked down at his rough hands. "I've spent my whole life wishing I had chosen what was valuable instead." Daniel remained silent. His father's words echoed in his heart. Sometimes, the greatest advice comes from someone who knows the pain of making the wrong choice. The next morning, the businessman arrived expecting Daniel's answer. "So, are you ready to become rich?" Daniel smiled politely, then shook his head. "No." The businessman laughed. "You'll regret this." Maybe he was right. Maybe not. Minutes later, Daniel walked into Mr. Samuel's old workshop. The smell of fresh wood filled the air. The tools were old. The walls were cracked. The pay was almost nothing. Samuel handed Daniel a broom. "Sweep the floor." Daniel looked confused. "I thought you were going to teach me carpentry." Samuel smiled. "I am. The first lesson. Respect every job." Daniel quietly picked up the broom. Outside, his friends rode past on shiny motorcycles. They laughed when they saw him cleaning the workshop. "Look! The future millionaire is sweeping floors." Daniel felt embarrassed. For a brief moment, he questioned his decision. Had he made a mistake? Was everyone else right? He looked at Mr. Samuel. The old carpenter was carefully carving a beautiful wooden chair by hand. Every movement was slow, precise, patient. Without looking up, Samuel said, "People who chase money first often spend their lives chasing it. But people who chase skill eventually attract opportunities that money alone can never buy." Daniel quietly smiled. He picked up the broom again. He didn't know it yet, but that simple decision, to choose learning over easy money, would change his entire life forever. The price of the right choice. The first year was the hardest. Every morning before sunrise, Daniel unlocked the old workshop. He swept the floor, organized the tools, carried heavy logs, sharpened blades, and cleaned up sawdust until sunset. Sometimes, he wondered if he was learning anything at all. His friends, meanwhile, seemed to be living their best lives. They wore expensive clothes, posted smiling photos, bought new motorcycles. Whenever they passed the workshop, they couldn't resist making jokes. "Daniel, how much did you earn today? Enough to buy lunch?" Laughter echoed down the street. Daniel forced a smile. But inside, their words hurt. One evening, Mr. Samuel noticed Daniel staring through the workshop window. "What do you see?" Daniel sighed. "I see everyone moving ahead. And me. I'm still here." The old carpenter put down his tools, then placed 2 pieces of wood on the table. One was soft. The other was strong oak. He handed Daniel a hammer. "Break the first one." Daniel did. It split instantly. "Now break the second." Daniel hit it again. And again. The oak barely cracked. Samuel smiled. The strongest things take the longest to shape. If your journey feels slow, it may be because you're becoming something that lasts. Daniel never forgot though. Words. Months turned into years. Slowly, Mr. Samuel trusted Daniel with real work. First, a simple wooden stool. Then, a dining table. Later, an elegant cabinet. Every mistake became a lesson. Every lesson became a skill. Daniel wasn't just building furniture anymore. He was building patience, discipline, and confidence. One afternoon, a wealthy businessman visited the workshop. He examined one of Daniel's handcrafted chairs. Running his fingers across the smooth wood, he asked, "Who made this?" Daniel stepped forward. "I did." The businessman smiled. "I'll buy 10. It was the biggest order the workshop had ever received. Daniel's heart raced with excitement. But before the furniture could be delivered, disaster struck. Late that night, a fire broke out in the workshop. Flames spread through the dry timber. Neighbors rushed with buckets of water. But it was too late. By sunrise, the workshop was gone. Years of tools, machines, and finished furniture, reduced to ashes. Daniel stood silently in the ruins. His hands trembled. His dreams seemed to disappear with the smoke. Mr. Samuel slowly walked beside him. For a long time, neither man spoke. Finally, Daniel whispered, "We lost everything." Samuel gently picked up a burned chisel from the ground. "No. We lost wood. We lost tools. But we didn't lose what matters most." Daniel looked confused. Samuel placed a hand on his shoulder. "They can burn a workshop, but they cannot burn your skills. They can destroy a building, but they cannot destroy the person you've become." For the first time since the fire, Daniel smiled. A small smile, but a real one. The next morning, instead of giving up, Daniel borrowed a small table, a few basic hand tools, and started working under the shade of an old tree near the village square. People stopped to watch. Some laughed again. He still hasn't learned. After losing everything, he's starting over? Daniel ignored them. One chair, one table, one customer at a time. His reputation slowly spread beyond the village. People weren't buying furniture anymore. They were buying craftsmanship. They were buying trust. They were buying quality. Months later, the same businessman returned. He looked around, surprised. "I heard your workshop burned down." Daniel nodded. "It did. The businessman smiled. Yet your work is even better now. He handed Daniel a contract. I don't want 10 shares anymore. I want 100. Daniel stared at the paper. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. The businessman leaned closer and said, I've met many people with money, but very few with character. That's why I'm investing in you. Daniel looked toward the empty land where the old workshop once stood. For the first time, he realized something powerful. The fire hadn't ended his journey. It had revealed the strength hidden inside him. But success was about to bring a new challenge. A challenge more dangerous than failure itself. The temptation of pride, the decision that made him great, final. 5 years passed. The old workshop, once reduced to ashes, was now replaced by a beautiful woodworking factory. Not the biggest in the country, but one of the most respected. People traveled from distant cities just to buy furniture made by Daniel. His craftsmanship had become a symbol of quality. More importantly, his name had become a symbol of trust. The same villagers who once laughed at him now proudly said, We've known Daniel since he was a child. Funny how success changes people's memories. One bright morning, a luxury black car stopped outside Daniel's factory. A wealthy businessman stepped out. His name was Richard Coleman, one of the richest furniture exporters in the country. He walked through the factory, inspecting every piece. The polished tables, the handcrafted chairs, the elegant cabinets. Finally, he smiled. I've heard a lot about you. And today, I understand why. Daniel thanked him politely. Richard placed a thick contract on the table. I want to buy your entire company. Daniel looked surprised. Richard continued. You'll receive $20 million. You'll never have to work again. The workers nearby couldn't believe what they were hearing. $20 million. It was more money than anyone in the village had ever imagined. Richard leaned forward. There is only one condition. Daniel quietly listened. We'll replace your handcrafted furniture with cheaper materials. The customers will never notice. Our profits will double. The room fell silent. Daniel looked at the contract. Then at the workers who had trusted him for years. Young apprentices. Single mothers. Old craftsmen. Every face reminded him of the journey that had brought him here. He remembered Mr. Samuel's first lesson. Respect every job. And his father's words. Choose what is valuable, not what is easy. This wasn't just a business decision. It was a decision about the kind of man he wanted to become. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He walked through the empty factory, running his hand across the wooden tables. He remembered sweeping dusty floors, working without recognition, starting over after the fire. Every struggle had shaped him. Would he throw it all away? For money? As the sun began to rise, he finally had his answer. The next morning, Richard arrived expecting a signature. Instead, Daniel gently closed the contract. I'm sorry. I can't accept. Richard frowned. Do you realize what you're refusing? Daniel smiled. Yes. I'm refusing money. So I don't lose something much more valuable. My reputation. Richard laughed. You'll regret this. Daniel calmly replied. Money can replace almost anything. But once people stop trusting you, no amount of money can buy that trust back. Richard picked up the contract. Without another word, he walked away. Months passed. Daniel continued building furniture the same way he always had. By hand. With patience. With honesty. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. A famous architect visited the factory. I've been searching for furniture makers across the country. Everywhere I went, People told me the same thing. If you want quality, go to Daniel. The architect offered Daniel the largest project of his career. He had been chosen to create all the handcrafted furniture for the country's new National Museum. It was an honor far greater than any amount of money. News spread quickly. Reporters arrived. Television crews interviewed him. One journalist asked, "What is the secret behind your success?" Daniel smiled. "There isn't one. I simply made one difficult decision. Every single day. The decision to choose honesty over shortcuts. Quality over speed. Learning over comfort. And purpose over profit." A few years later, Mr. Samuel grew old. His hands could no longer carve wood. One evening, Daniel invited him to the factory. The old carpenter slowly walked through the building. He saw dozens of young apprentices learning the same skills he had once taught. Tears filled his eyes. "You've built something much greater than a business." Daniel smiled. "I only continued what you started." Mr. Samuel looked around proudly. "No. You became the teacher. And that is every teacher's greatest dream." Many years later, Daniel retired. His hair had turned gray. But every Monday morning, he still visited the workshop. Not to work. To encourage young craftsmen. One day, a teenage apprentice asked him, "Sir, what was the biggest decision of your life?" Everyone expected him to mention the day he refused the $20 million offer. Or the day he built his company. Or the day he received the museum contract. Daniel smiled gently. "No. The biggest decision happened long before any of that. It was the morning I chose learning. Instead of easy money. Everything else was simply the result of that one decision." The apprentice looked thoughtful. Daniel placed an old wooden broom in his hands. The greatest journeys don't begin with giant opportunities. They begin with small choices. Made with great character. As the sun set behind the mountains, Daniel locked the workshop one final time. He looked at the sign above the entrance. It read, "Build with integrity." He smiled. Not because he had become wealthy. Not because he had become famous. But because he had become the man he had once dreamed of becoming. And in the end, that was the greatest success of all. Moral: your future is shaped by the decisions you make when no one is watching. Easy choices bring temporary comfort. Difficult choices build lasting character. Remember, one good decision may seem small today, but it can change your entire life tomorrow.